Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started. We may have a few folks who are just sorting the technology and will join us in a couple minutes. But we're very pleased to be actually holding our fourth webinar for this season, a sort of bonus that we've got here. So if you just joined us, you can press star 2 to mute your phone, and I'll remind you again at the end of the presentation to press star 2 to unmute. So I'd like to just start by saying I'm Erin Hancock. I'm the coordinator with the Measuring the Cooperative Difference Research Network, and we are a pan-Canadian network of cooperative researchers from a variety of disciplines, and also cooperative practitioners from across all subsectors of the movement. We hold at least 3 free webinars each fall and 3 each winter through spring that explore a different element of the cooperative difference or the impact of cooperatives on their communities across Canada or globally. These webinars are open to the public, and feel free to invite your colleagues and friends and direct them to our website so they can be notified of upcoming events as well, please. We'd also like to invite you at the end of this webinar today to offer some suggestions for future webinars if you have an idea or a research interest that you'd like to share with the broader community. That's what we're trying to do here, is engage in that dialogue. So we invite your ideas. So this particular webinar is benchmarking cooperative performance, the CoopMetrics framework, and we have 2 very special guests today, Rosemary Mahoney and Walden Swanson from CoopMetrics Cooperative. So this webinar is led by CoopMetrics, as you've probably heard through the publications and notifications about this webinar, and they are a cooperative whose members are workers as well as consumers, and they use the co-op structure to share innovation among benchmarking sectors. So CoopMetrics provides benchmarking services and business analytics for U.S. retail food cooperatives, independent food retailers, farm supply and marketing cooperatives, alternative nursing homes, ethanol plants, and affordable housing developers. So this session will provide an overview of the framework and tools and include sample reports and a discussion of user experiences with the program. I'd like to now give the bios of our 2 featured speakers today, so that you'll know a bit more about them. So again, if you've just joined, please press star 2 to mute your line, so we can avoid some background noise. So Rosemary Mahoney is the Chief Executive Officer of CoopMetrics, and prior to becoming CEO of CoopMetrics, she worked as a consultant on international cooperative development projects and cooperative business development projects in the U.S. She was a founding partner of MainStreet Cooperative Group, Director of New Venture Development for Cooperative Solutions, Executive Director of Cooperative Development Services, and Regional Director for Volunteers and Overseas Cooperative Assistance in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. At present, Rosemary serves on the boards of directors of the National Cooperative Business Association, the National Cooperative Grocers Association, National Cooperative Grocers Association Development Cooperative, Thanexus, Incorporated, dotCooperative, the Cooperative Foundation, and NCB Capital Impact. Rosemary formerly served on the boards of directors of NCB, which was formerly known as the National Cooperative Bank, Cooperative Development Institute, and CooperationWorks. She's received the Honored Cooperator Award. So we're lucky to have Rosemary here today, given her schedule and all the various hats that she's wearing. We also have Walden Swanson with us today, and Walden was the founder and director of new initiatives for CoopMetrics. And Walden has significant management, banking, and board experience. He's been a turnaround manager and negotiated mergers and acquisitions. His banking experience includes graduating in the top quartile of the American Bankers Association Commercial Lending School and working with CEAG, an advisory firm in the Czech Republic associated with Solomon Brothers. Walden serves on the board of the National Cooperative Bank and NCB Capital Impact, as well as many cooperative nonprofit and for-profit boards. He has a BBA in the Honors Program from the University of Texas and is a Microsoft SQL Server Certified Professional. Walden has received the Cooperative Service Award, Cooperative Innovation and Achievement Award, the Honored Cooperator Award, and was inducted into the Cooperative Hall of Fame in 2008. So we're clearly very lucky to have these two special guests with us here today, and they'll take us through the program. And then we'll save about 15 minutes at the end of the hour to have questions for them and to address anything that has come up through the course of the webinar. So I'll hand it over to you, Rosemary.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you also for hosting this seminar today. Walt and I are very excited to be able to talk about CoopMetrics and show you a little bit about what we do. I'm just going to speak for a few minutes at the beginning, and since this is a cooperative network and we are cooperative, we wanted to introduce you a little bit to our cooperative and how it operates. And then Walton will get in and talk more about what we do and how we do it and show you some of the tools. So we are a shared services cooperative, and our members share the cost of what you'll see as a very, soon you'll see a very sophisticated data warehouse. And what we're trying to do with that data warehouse is to collect financial and non-financial data from the members who participate, and then to turn that data back around in a comparable form with their peers so they can really have access to Fortune 500 quality business intelligence tools. So it's going to allow them to compare themselves with peers. It's also going to provide some management tools to them for their individual business. And who we're trying to serve through this is really locally owned independent businesses as well as cooperatives. From my perspective, we want to see kind of a competitive economic environment within a community so that your shopping options aren't just big boxes and chain stores. But we also provide services to nonprofits. They're in a pretty tough environment right now with cutbacks in government funding as well as cutbacks in foundation funding. And so we want to see if we can use our tools to help them become better managers and better operators of their enterprises so that there's more of the funds that they receive actually going into the programming that they deliver. As was said already, we have 5 classes of members at CoopMetrics. 50% of the company is owned by the workers. 30% is owned by the consumers or the sponsors who buy our services. Our clients are really usually cooperatives or associations of independent businesses that can bring in a community of businesses into the program. We have 7 sponsors at this point, 7 communities that we serve. We also have a class for developers, so people who have people with tech skills will come in and work for us really at a reduced rate. And we give them a share of the company and a share of the ownership. And then for the founders of the company who really launched the cooperative initially 17 years ago, we were formed legally about 8 years ago. We have 5 directors on our board, including Chuck Snyder and Terry Simonette from National Cooperative Bank. They represent the investor class, although there's no money in the investor class. Robin Schrader from NCGA represents NCGA in the consumer class, and then Walden is our board chair, and Brad Langhorst, our chief technology officer, is the other worker member. The sectors we serve include National Cooperative Grocers Association, which really was the organization that our program got started. CoopMetrics emerged from a benchmarking program that Walden and Kate developed for the food co-ops in the United States. All of the members of the National Cooperative Grocers Association participate in this program, and for some of them we have up to 18 years of data in the warehouse. We also serve the Independent Natural Food Retailers Association, which are in some ways the NCGA members' competitors. They're independent natural food retailers. We have a program for the very large grain and farm supply cooperatives in the Midwest. Some of those are billion-dollar industries. Our sponsor there is the Iowa Institute for Cooperatives. We also serve ethanol processing plants, and the sponsor for that is an investment bank called Ascendant Partners. And that's a very small program. It's invitation only. Right now it only has 4 plants in it. But what's interesting from our perspective is that for them, what they really wanted to look at was their processing data. How effectively are they converting corn into alcohol? And so for this sector, we adjusted our system and built a functionality to where we take daily grain processing information so they can do benchmarking against how efficiently they're manufacturing ethanol. Then we also serve affordable housing developers and their properties. And in this sector, we have over 100,000 units of housing. And we're just launched a program recently with the Heron Foundation in New York, which internally we call the Foundation Cooperative. Externally, it's called the Data Collaborative. And the idea for this program is that foundations in the U.S. will come together and share a portfolio analysis system in which nonprofits can submit their data. Webb will talk a little bit more about that when he goes through the demonstration. And then we have the Greenhouse Project, which is the alternative nursing home. And our sponsor there is NCB Capital Impact. Okay, well,
Yep, thanks. So once I was trying to sell this program 8 years ago to one of the largest co-ops in the country and a prominent one, and basically when I was making the presentation, I was just told that what we were doing could not be done and kind of thrown out on my ear. They are now using the program. So the question, maybe if we knew that before we started this company, we would have never tried it. But we didn't know that it couldn't be done. But we've done quite a few things that other people said couldn't be done. So how did we do that? There are only 11 of us, and we do a lot of sectors, as you mentioned, and our data warehouse is quite significant now. How did that happen? And one of the secrets happened about 10 years ago, and I was on vacation with a relative who worked at MIT at the Whitehead Institute on the Human Genome Project, and I was trying to redesign our database, so it would handle additional sectors. We just started out with the grocery co-ops, and we were adding some new ones at the request of the Co-op Bank. And I was just having a terrible time. I was kind of teaching myself database mechanics. And Brad, from the Genome Project, where he worked on databases, looked at my design when I asked him for help. And he literally wadded up that piece of paper that I had drawn it on and threw it in the corner. And he started afresh. And he designed our relational database where all of the data goes in. And we still use that. And more importantly, Brad got hooked. His PhD is in bioinformatics, and he works for a big pharmaceutical, but he is still our chief technology officer and puts plenty of time into our business too, and is an owner and is on the board and directs all of our IT. And so it was just almost accidental that such a small company could get such a big brain, you might say, that makes our technology work, but that design is a big part of it. The second thing that really works for us that I don't think anybody's been able to do quite as well is get the data in. When we first started, it took people about 4 hours each quarter, 4 hours, 4 times a year to fill out the forms and to get their financial and non-financial data into us, where we would put it into the database. But we radically restructured that, and this is quite significant. What we basically said is that you sit down at your accounting software on your computer, and you just export a trial balance and don't touch it, with all of the detail that comes with the full trial balance, and don't touch it. Just export it to us. You just upload it. And what was that? You just upload it to our secure website, and then we design tools. We spent a lot of resources in tearing that data apart when it comes in a CSV or text file or Excel, and then we do all of that mapping. And we are very proud that it's now 4 minutes 4 times a year instead of 4 hours 4 times a year. That's made a huge difference in getting the data from people and also reducing the number of errors. That's a big part of it. And the third thing is that we focus on technology, and we partner with a sponsor that's smarter than us in an industry. So in the big grain co-op industry, a professor, an endowed professor from Iowa State University is what we call the industry expert, and they help co-ops use the data And Land O'Lakes also, their regional reps do the same. We teach their business reps how to use the tool, and then they can work with their local partners and the co-ops to use the data. Ascendant Partners, as Rosemary said, is an investment bank that knows the tools and then works with those ethanol plants to use the data. So that's a big part for us. We want to be nerds. And then sharing benchmarking practices across sectors has proved very useful too. Somebody will come up with a tool or a way to look at the data that we hadn't thought of, but it might be useful to other people. And then they're rewarded in that developer class that Rosemary mentioned also, that's part of our co-op. And it's kind of like an app. Like if you were participating in this and you came up with a clever way to look at the data or present the data to your users, then that would be like an app, and you would get a little reward for that over time. The data flow is basically you don't change anything in your chart of accounts in your co-op. You just export that data, and then we map it to a common chart of accounts that is designed by a group of 3 to 5 best CFOs from an industry. And then after that data is mapped, it's stored in the data warehouse, and then when it's pulled out in any kind of report, it comes back in that common format reflected in that common chart of accounts. And we've automated a lot of this because of we had to scale where we are now. But some of the data comes in quarterly, and ethanol is actually at a daily grain that's submitted weekly. So it depends on how you use the data, and that will determine how often you submit it. But this is pretty much automated. There are places where a human being needs to look at that data to verify it, especially if there's a new account. That kind of combination of machine and human is the way the data comes in and goes out. One of the key things that you might do is if you're using benchmarking now too, this has worked out very well for us. The website has a profile, so each company, say this is for housing, they come up with the ways they want to cut the data. So in this particular case, they know that they want to look at single-family development, and somebody else might want to look at multifamily development, and somebody else might want to look at commercial. So those are all options for companies that are participating. And they fill out that profile one time, or if something changes, they would amend it. And this allows them to cut the data and to create their own peer groups by choosing those parameters when they look at the data. And there are just a few other things that they came up with, the staff size and the area of the country. And then in housing, they filled out one of these for each of their properties, too. So someone might have 50 properties around the state, and they'd fill in their census tract and how big it was and the number of units. And this allows them to cut the data so that they can look at the one-bedroom units and see what the utility expense is compared to two-bedroom or three-bedroom units. Just a few little bottom line impacts that we're proud of in the grocery industry using one tool called the GAP. There was a big annual savings reported out. We didn't know this was coming, but it was at a conference, and then the presenter talked about the impact that this little program had. And just last week we got this message. It kind of blew us away, and kind of gave us chill bumps that one of these ethanol producers thought that they had saved $2 million in the last year by the use of this program with their peers. And these are big plants, these ethanol plants, but they're Davids competing with Goliaths when you compare them to ADM and Cargill. So $2 million is a lot of money for somebody in that industry. And then this article by another user in the grocery industry was great for us too, because it was unsolicited, and just a little table from that article shows during the recession how this this co-op had just dramatic results and really did a nice, beautiful turnaround. In the policy area, this is kind of cool. I think a lot of you will probably appreciate this, is how the Iowa Institute of Cooperatives kind of used the data to convince the regulators to deal most appropriately with the farm co-ops during the highs and lows of the corn cycle, and they were able to persuade them that things were going well. And it was a data-based approach to policy impact that worked well. And for you researchers, we're very proud to have participated with the data to the group that wrote this article on the alternative healthcare system that Rosemary mentioned, and it got the GE award for the best research paper in that particular area. So just to switch now, I'll save the questions to the end, but write down anything that you want to talk about. You can kind of see there are lots of different ways to pull out the data once you get into this nice data warehouse. On top of the database, there's an OLAP server, that's online analytical processing, which makes returning the data to the user very fast. And there are quite a few tools. It depends on the sector. So this particular one is in housing. If you are in grocery or ethanol, this launch page would be different because you might need different reports than housing developers would use. But this is pretty typical of where you might start. And if you go to the Groups tab, for instance, on this one, so this is the typical of a benchmarking kind of program. In this particular sector, the users are anonymous. So each of you, say that each of you are a housing developer, a nonprofit, low-income housing developer, and you would know your number. You would know your 14710. And nobody else would know who you are. So this preserves anonymity. In other sectors, your name would appear here. For instance, ethanol and grocery both require you to be non-anonymous, to have your name there. They want to know who's doing well so that you can call them and get better faster. But it's a choice. And in some sectors, it's mixed, anonymity with transparency. You can do both. But, the little plus here basically can drill down into the properties in this particular case. You can see down here, it's actually, this Excel file was just going out to the data warehouse and pulling back the data. The data is not stored in Excel. Excel is just the user interface, which has an embedded connection string that's secure that reaches into the data warehouse when you query it. But just like you would expect, you can just compare your data to others that are like you. If you look back here, you can see that the little form that I was going over in the PowerPoint, this is where you can constrict your data so that you can see, if I want to see everybody from California, for instance, it'll narrow that larger group to the 7 companies that are in California, and now you can compare regionally. And there are some nice little tools with this, like you can identify the quartiles, and the quartiles will, if the blue, you're in the upper quartile of current assets, and if yellow, you're in the lower. And you can kind of compare your income statement and balance sheet, and then these key ratios. The key ratios are, again, picked by that initial committee of the best CFOs in an industry, and they come up with these. So it's different for each sector. Once you learn kind of these, what the pluses mean, you can it's just the same thing on every page of this little report. So I can double click on occupancy expense, for instance, and it'll drill down to a more detailed level. And if I look down here and I say, oh my gosh, look at all of these utility expenses, and some people are 11.4 in California, and some people are 8.2. So I can keep drilling, and then I can kind of find out what might be causing that difference and where that difference might come from, and then if there's anything that I can do to reduce my utility expenses, again using this little quartile function. So that's one way of looking at the data, just with your peers kind of this way. You can kind of chart the data by looking at one ratio. There's the 7 from California again over a time period, and you can kind of see what's going on with the current ratio that way. And you can just pick any of the other ratios, or in fact any item on the income statement or balance sheet to graph the same way. It's nice. You can create a nice little copy of this if you wanted to put together a booklet for your board or for some paper. You could accumulate a lot of different graphs into a nice little workbook. Wow. Too. You can look at this the same data in a table. These are trends. A red is a bad trend and a green is a good trend, and the orange are outliers. So you kind of want to make sure that that's good data there. And if it is good data, you want to understand why those outliers are occurring. Well, that's kind of a useful little tool there. One other, I'm going to race through these reports so we have enough time for questions. But as you can see on this tab, the quartiles tab, you still have the same way of cutting the data. You have little hints up here of how to use this report. And in this particular one is pretty neat little report. This came up, this was developed by someone in that greenhouse sector, the alternative nursing homes. And if you identify the quartiles, this is your data. And then this is the upper quartile, the median, and the lower quartile for the peer group that you've selected. And again, you can just kind of go down and see where you're in the upper quartile or the lower quartile. And accounts receivable days is high, 23.33. So the blue doesn't necessarily mean good. It just means you're in the upper quartile of your comparison group. But once you do that, you've kind of identified some of the areas that you might want to improve on. Another way of looking at the same data is this little spreadsheet. It's called the GAP. That was one of the ones that produced that $800,000 savings in the PowerPoint slide. And this particular one is in the grocery industry, and it looks simple, like it's just a simple bar graph, but boy, does it have a lot of data in it. This is margin minus labor plus sales growth, and it's compared to a peer group so that the manager of the grocery store can glance at this and say, wow, I'm really doing good in deli. But when I interpolate these numbers, I'm really suffering in meat and HABA, health and beauty aids, and that might be where I want to focus my energy. And in fact, you can look at some other parts of this graph. You can see where these other items have been added. And if you look at grocery this way, there's a little place where you kind of fill in your first thoughts about grocery on the vertical analysis when I look at sales growth and margin and wages and inventory, and then your next steps. And then there's also a horizontal analysis. When I look across sales growth this way, it's all in red, which means I'm not in the upper quartile at all in any of that. And there might be something going on about the way I'm trying to price my products or do advertising that I might can get some help from some peers and turn that around. So that's the horizontal analysis and the vertical analysis in this little tool. And one other little aspect of this tool is say that you're the manager and you've looked at that very first graph and you know that the meat department needs some attention, you can work with the manager, and then in the little blue cells, the manager says, oh, man, I thought I was doing so good, 6% growth. I thought that was great. But when I look at my peers, I realize meat across the country is really growing fast, and I'm not as good as I thought. But I ought to be able to get the sales up after I talk to some of my compatriots and figure out how to promote our meat products better. And the same thing with margin. So they just change this, and then it has a dollar impact there, and they kind of put together a little mini business plan using this particular type of tool. So that's just another way of using the data. One other quick thing, the gray that you see here and here, this is a system out of statistical control. We're looking here at dollar amounts. Earlier we looked at percentages or common size, and then on the quartile tab we looked at a per unit kind of measure of way of in the housing industry. So you can choose any of those ways of looking at the data on any of these tabs. This particular forecast tool, though, I wanted to show you before I went over a couple of other nifty little tools. But this one basically takes the history and the level of detail from this tab. So say that I've, if I wanted to drill down on occupancy again and look at some of that utility expense like this, and then I can go ahead and draw my trends or systems out of control or deviants, and it'll go through and put in these marks that we discussed earlier, and then I can forecast. Now, count how long this takes. So it's basically taking the historical data and it's putting it into a brand new spreadsheet, which it just did, and then it creates a budget. So say I just want to go out 4 quarters, or if you have a government program that needs 7 years, you could put 7 years of growth there. But basically it takes the history and forecasts it based on what you've done before. So if I open up the income statement now, anything in blue I can change. You can see that it's got the next 4 quarters budgeted out. And then you override the algorithms that are in these cells. Say if I think my development revenues are going to be $10 million, you can put in the $10 million there. I'll add a 0. You can put in the $10 million there, and then it actually learns as it goes forward because you put in something else other than what the computer had first thought was going to happen. Or you can link to a spreadsheet if you have development revenues already forecasted some other way, or you can put in a formula based on percentage of members or percentage of sales. The nice thing is it does tie back into the cash flow, and you have your cash is adjusted. If I wipe out all my accounts receivable there, you can see my cash went up, and then it's reflected in the future. And then it comes with those ratios that we looked at earlier in a common size income statement and balance sheet, and then rolling so that you can do fiscal reports. So really, the whole point of this is basically you get the data into a really good data warehouse. You can kind of pull it out any way you want to. I did want to mention this little report because it uses more of the non-financial data and where some of the co-op difference metrics might come in. This is based on a CAMEL score. All U.S. banks and credit unions get a CAMEL score each year from their regulators. And coming from the banking industry, we kind of adapted that CAMEL score. The CAMEL is like capital adequacy, and the L is for liquidity and asset quality and those kind of factors. And they're all combined into a kind of a credit score for a company in this particular case. And that's between 0 and 100. So as you can see here, the co-ops that are at this end of the spectrum are doing quite well compared to their peers. And the ones up at the top are improving faster than their peers. So from a national perspective, those in pink over here are red or the ones that we're worried about. And in this particular sector, this worked quite well. The industry did focus on these, and during the recession, they didn't lose any money, and no one went out of business. And then the green, or you've got a high score and you're improving, let me help you expand. That's how the National Association kind of uses this particular type of tool. I did want to mention it. I've hidden column 1 just to keep it anonymous, but this is a correlation just with R squares with non-financial data. So here's the financial results that we were just looking at, but then it's correlated with these big factors here: marketing and branding, talent, operating systems, member value, planning, customer service, and board effectiveness. And this was accumulated from a survey that Rosemary helped put together. And this is done maybe once a year or once every 2 years on site for each of the co-ops. And they're given the score. That goes into the data warehouse. And then we did these little R squares here that were very illuminating for sure. The thing that surprised me was how low the R squares were, which basically means there's no silver bullet. There are a whole lot of things you have to do well to have a good co-op. And you can kind of drill down and see the parts that make up these particular headings, and then the R squares reflected here too. So this is against financial performance, and you can see that this this is based on member input that had the highest R square under this member value. And then we did a correlation by expansions too. That's what this one does. And the R squares were really different. The monitoring of planning systems came up with a really high R square, as you would expect for an expansion, but it's very low for an existing same store or identical store kind of situation, which is a little surprising. And how much time the manager spent on the floor made a big difference and has a pretty high R square too. I thought that was just an interesting observation of the data. Now I think it's one other quick little thing, and then we'll start questions. This is another type of report, just pulling out of the same data warehouse, and you can look at inventory levels over time. This is broken down by quarter and accounts payable, just the same kind of thing you might expect. This is pretty neat. This industry has compliance, so they'll say you have to have a certain amount of sales growth, say 5%, and if you're below that, you're out of compliance. And this is a count of the number of co-ops that are out of compliance with that 5%, and then it's graphed there. So they use this to kind of manage their sector and look at the trends over time. And I believe that's all of the ones that I had. I think I think that should give you a pretty good indication of just different ways you can pull data out of a well-designed data warehouse to present it in whatever way is useful for your sector and your industry. Just open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Walden and Rosemary.
Sure.
We did have one question that came in online so far. And Walden, I wonder if I'll leave it with you sharing your screen so that if people have questions about the database, then you'll have it there. Okay.
Yeah.
So Diane Gasway, are you there on the call? If you want to press *2 to unmute to start your question. Are you there, Diane? Okay, well, I have Diane's question here. Oh, go right ahead.
There she is.
Actually, it's not Diane. It's Meredith from Diane's office. How are you?
Good.
And so my question had to do, are you currently working with any kind of a group that represents food hubs in which they are consolidating volumes and ideally have some kind of distribution also?
That's a great question. There are quite a few in the grocery industry, there are quite a few co-ops that have kind of created their own food or adapted the idea of a food hub. La Montanita in New Mexico basically created a distribution system. It's like a trucking company, and several on the East Coast have done the same in the Wedge in the upper Midwest. And so it's an adaptation of the food hub concept. And we do track that data it's like an outlet or a separate entity. So once enough co-ops are doing that in this existing sector, then we'll be able to compare the food hub experience. How much is the transportation, the administrative overhead, et cetera, for those particular type of systems. We do not at this time have a sector that's more of the traditional food hubs, and that would be an interesting sector to track. That's a great question.
So how
did that answer your question? Did I get at the right thing that you were asking?
Yeah. So a related question would be, how does a group go about joining CoopMetrics and seeking that kind of analysis support?
Rosemary, you want to take that one?
So you want to take that, Walden?
Sure.
Hi, Meredith. Hi. One other thing on the food hub, we did get, I guess, an email or a phone call about a month ago from one of the authors of that paper out of greenhouses that won the GE Award, suggesting that we look at food hubs, that he thought USDA was interested in trying to collect some data for analysis around food hubs, but then either he nor I could figure out who at USDA to talk to, so I haven't done anything with it. But if a group wants to get started, basically, we have this conversation and kind of explain what the system does, what we're responsible for, what we expect a sponsor to be able to do, and then what we do is we set up a pilot project in which we create the common chart of accounts. We have hopefully about 3 companies, but we'll take up to 6 in the pilot group who will help design that chart of accounts along with the sponsor. They'll identify the initial metrics that they want to measure, the initial reports that they want to have. And through that, we'll identify what is the non-financial data we need to collect. As I said, we'll create the common chart of accounts, and then we'll start mapping those test companies onto that common chart, collecting their historic data. We typically take up to 2 years of history when we bring in a new company, so they can look at their own trends, and we'll have some data in the warehouse for comparisons. And then as a group, we'll make a decision whether we'll produce the initial reports, and then we'll have a discussion about whether there seems to be enough value, whether this is the kind of program that would work, and if so, we would roll it out to other companies or other organizations within that sector. And we price the pilot project as a distinct program, and then based on the experience there, we set up the pricing going forward. Okay. And probably ones that are just starting up, that are more volatile, they're not as good a candidate for this kind of tracking. Would that be true? Yeah, typically, they're startup companies. Mm-hmm. So or startup co-ops. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be a little bit more of a challenge. Well, might have some thoughts on that, but we have a little tool that we use, which is called kind of a benchmarking readiness survey. Oh, great! It's just kind of, there's about 12 elements on it that says, if you how well do you fit these criteria? You want businesses that are fairly comparable. You want folks who, for us, obviously they have to be keeping their books electronically. So, there's just a few, few things like that.
We've got a few other questions here that have come in, actually. We've got Fred from the Saskatchewan Cooperative Association. Did you want to press star 2 to unmute? A bit of a delay there. We can't hear you yet, Fred. Okay, maybe we can come back to you in a minute. Do we have Jamila Bashiri on the phone?
Sorry, could you hear me, or?
Yes, is that Fred?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead, Fred. What's your question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the tables you presented. A lot of it's in Excel form, and I was just wondering, do you guys also do like cloud computing so people can access their data from anywhere with an internet access?
Oh, that's a great question. Two answers to that one. Actually, what you're looking at in Excel is a cloud application. It was before we knew the word cloud, but basically the data is all on a server, so you can access it from any computer as long as you have the user interface that you use. And then we also use what we call it is the Excel is ugly and deep, and Tableau, which we just purchased for the web reports, is pretty and shallow. And so there's a web reporting format, too, that's more of a dashboard kind of application or user interface, and that's what we're working on this year to develop to go with this deep and ugly, and we want the pretty and shallow kind of. We want to be really good at both of those. So that's our big project this year, is to access some of these reports from a web browser. It's a great question, and our big project for the year.
But
going back, the key thing is Excel. The data is not in Excel. The data is in the cloud, and just returned when you issue one of those queries.
As a follow-up question, I was curious, when I was looking at it, you mentioned a little bit that it is in Excel and it can get a bit complicated. Do you work with clients to maneuver and be able to do analysis for those who aren't, I guess, as smart as you in regards to looking at this stuff?
Not so much. What we use there is and it's part of it's letting our sector sponsor brand it. So the Iowa Institute has a person that works with the client to use the data, and then will actually produce reports. A lot of what they use is for boards of directors. So a board might have an annual planning strategy session, and then the Iowa Institute person will produce reports for that CEO to use with their boards in that planning session. So we don't as much as they do, but it is a person, or like the Land Lakes business development person. They're the ones that might help the client use the data.
So one of the things we do is we have a set of training materials. So anytime a new tool rolls out, a new functionality, we'll put how to use those video clips. We have a variety of resources that the users can refer to. If they're not in this every day, sometimes they forget how things work, and so we have that available for them.
Okay, we've got a couple other questions here. Thanks, Brett. Folks are wondering the cost of the program to the co-op and what is sort of involved in. You did mention to us so far that it's a very quick export of folks' statement of accounts, charter of accounts to in order to get the database up and rolling for whatever that particular sector is. But in terms of getting folks up and running as a full sector, what does that process look like, and what is the cost?
Well, the way our pricing works, as I mentioned, we have a price for that pilot phase, and then we have there's a one-time setup fee for any company coming in, which we're mapping and mapping that company in, and then taking their historic data. That's all covered in that one-time setup fee. And then there's an annual data warehouse service fee, and that's based on, really, as you can see by the sectors we have some fairly simple, straightforward business sectors, and then we have some fairly complex, complicated sectors. And we also have a large number of different reports and whatnot that people can select from, or we'll develop custom reports for them. So the pricing is really kind of a sliding scale depending on how complex you are versus how many reports you're taking. So a pilot project is around $50,000, and then the setup fees range anywhere from $500 to $2,500, and the processing fees on an annual basis we try to keep those run anywhere from about $750 per company to about $1,500
One other thing on pricing, though, that along with your question that I think is interesting to us is that some of our sectors pass on all of the costs to their members, so that the members pay the sector sponsor, and then we're paid. But some sectors, like the grocers, it's just the benefit of membership. So there's just one invoice to the national organization, and then everybody has to participate. So they use it for managing their receivables. And another sector, a couple of other sectors have it as a profit center. We bill the national organization, and then the national organization bills the members more than it costs them. And then so it becomes a profit center for them. So it's every different way. No cost to a user to a high cost per user. But our relationship is with that sector sponsor.
Thank you, Walton. I meant to say that, and I forgot.
Okay, that's good. So also ask
one other quick thing on that one, if you don't mind. An important thing, I think, to all of us is that we expect the sectors to become members, and then, of course, there's a patronage dividend for the consumer members as well.
Okay, thank you. What would it take to adapt this system for the Canadian movement?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What would it take to adapt this system, CoopMetrics, for Canadian use?
Walden? I don't think there would be any issues, because all the companies coming in would be the same currency, right?
I think there would be a little change in the chart of accounts, which is unique to each sector anyway. But we've been talking to a large Australian co-op too, and so that might be our first international foray. And we don't know. We haven't thought through the exchange rate issue, but if it's all Canadian, there wouldn't be the exchange rate issue. If it was U.S. and Canadian, there might be. But conceptually or technically, from our point of view, the way data comes into the data warehouse and is parsed and then is put back into a common chart of account that the sector comes up with, I don't think there's any problem until we cross the national boundary and then deal with the exchange rates. Did that get at your question?
Sure, I think so. I'm conveying here. If anybody would like to press *2 to unmute to add to that question, then certainly you're welcome to. But there is another one that came in, and that is how can researchers access this data, and what types of things beyond what you've already mentioned has it been used for?
We do have a what's called a researcher role, and that's by sector. So the housing sector wanted researchers to be able to access the data warehouse, but the grocery industry does not. So it's sector by sector, and it's we have a double role-based system for security reasons, but we do have a researcher role that can be designated as aggregate data without looking at individual data, or individual data that's anonymous depending on the sector. So we kind of incorporated that into our architecture. Do you want to add anything to that, Rosemary, about the researcher role?
Yeah, no, I mean, only for us, as Walden described, our relationship with the sponsors, the agreement we have with them, which is, I think, also sets us apart a little bit, is that, we own all the technology, but they actually own and control the data. And so if NCGA said, we want researchers to start using this data and helping us produce reports about us, or looking at what we're doing, we make that access available, and then we work with those researchers to get what they need. So that's basically how researchers would have the access. It would be going through the sponsors that we have.
Thank you. Sonia Yalkovich, I'm wondering if you'd like to share anything. I know that one of the reasons why we wanted to hear more about CoopMetrics is because we're doing a number of tool development projects out of the Atlantic cluster of this research network. And I'm wondering if you want to speak to that or some of the ways in which what we're doing is complemented by this work.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you so much for this informative presentation. I hope it was useful to others as well. Some of the questions I had were already online, and you've addressed them. So I understand the research aspect was one of my questions, and so you explained that this is really going through the sponsor. So let's say that if we would like here to use CoopMetrics services in Canada, we could then make arrangements with whoever the sponsor would be to actually have access for researchers, right?
You mean access to the data that's there now, or access to collect?
That would be arranged with the sponsor who is in control of the data. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. For the existing programs, exactly.
All right. And on you explained with the R-squares the correlation with some of the non-financial data to the financial data. So could the system be adapted to additional surveys? So if say, one would develop additional kinds of surveys with, for example, compliance with the principles and values of cooperation, and try to link that to the financials, that could be done in a similar way?
Sure. Yeah, that's built into the way we've architected the system for that non-financial data. We have those tables already, so it would just be adding the questions basically, and then pulling up the data to do the R-squares or any other type of statistical analysis.
Right. Yeah, that's what I think would be very interesting if we could make a correlation between the performance and the cooperativeness, if you will.
That's a neat idea, Sonia. That's really good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is wonderful. Thanks so much. I think that's all I have to add to this. Hopefully somebody else has more things to clear up, and I'll be in touch outside of this hour.
One other comment, Sonia, in the area that you brought up. That's the second priority for us this year, is to do for social and impact data what we've done for financials, that going from the 4 hours to the 4 minutes. So we want to figure out a way this year, and the foundation world is really supporting us in this, is to pull in non-financial data, like some of the data that you just mentioned, in so that people don't have to fill out forms, and it can come in automatically and without error, and we'll get more data, and it'll be better data, and people are more likely to want to participate if getting the data in, that non-financial data in, is less of a hassle for sure. We were just involved with a project that was looking at social metrics, and it was like taking 18 hours to fill out some of the information, and we need to take that down to 18 minutes. To get that non-financial data in, something like that kind of factor. That's our other big project of this year.
Wonderful. Yeah, good to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonia. And thanks, people. I don't think any other questions have come in online. We're just at the hour mark, so I think we'll wind it up there. And that was a good discussion and good questions, certainly. But I want to thank you, Rosemary and Walden, for sharing this program with us and for persevering through the times where it was challenging to set up this program, because I think it's got a lot of potential for the movement and for all of the subsectors in lots of different ways, and allows us to be ahead of our private sector partners in some ways in terms of doing these things and really setting our goals and sorting out our paths towards them. So thank you both so much for all of your work and for your time here today. And we'll invite others on the line to visit us again at cooperativedifference.coop to hear about the webinars that will be coming up in the fall and to hear about our projects as they progress. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao.